They thought they had won, but they were wrong. Dead wrong. Under the blood-red sky of the Black Citadel, the final battle between good and evil had reached its climax. The ground trembled with the clash of steel and magic. The air was heavy with ash and screams. Hundreds of soldiers lay in pieces across the obsidian battlefield. Paladins, mages, even dragons had all united to bring him down. And now, there he was, the Demon King himself, bleeding, kneeling, defeated, or so they believed. King Aldrich of the Holy Empire, sword gleaming with sacred light, stepped forward with narrowed eyes. "This is the end, monster. Your reign of terror dies today." The other heroes gathered beside him, the Sword Saint, the High Archmage, the Beast King of the Northern Tribes. Together they had done the impossible. They had brought the Demon King to his knees. His once fiery wings had turned to ash, and the crown that once floated above his head had shattered into fragments. But instead of begging, the Demon King smiled. A slow, wicked, almost peaceful smile. "You fools," he rasped, coughing up dark blood. "You think this is the end. No, this is only the beginning." A flicker of unease crossed the heroes' faces. Aldrich gripped his sword tighter. "What are you saying?" With what little strength he had left, the Demon King raised one trembling hand and began to etch a burning rune into the air, a forbidden symbol long thought erased from the world's history. Magic older than time. Cursed language of the underworld gods. "You have slain this body," the Demon King said, voice rising as energy surged from the rune. "But my soul is unbound. This spell, carved in blood and vengeance, will carry me into your world again, not as a monster, but as one of you." The sky cracked with black lightning. The earth split beneath him. The Archmage screamed, "Stop him! That's soul transference magic!" But it was too late. With a final laugh that echoed across the heavens, the Demon King slammed his hand into the ground. The runes exploded outward, branding themselves into the sky like cursed constellations. A blinding pulse of light engulfed the battlefield. And when it cleared, the Demon King's body had turned to dust. Gone. No trace. Only silence. And then, far away, in a peaceful human village, untouched by war, a baby's cry pierced the night, eyes glowing red, born with darkness in his veins.
The Demon King had returned, not as a beast, but reborn in human flesh. And this time, he wouldn't make the same mistakes. In the ashes of defeat, a new fire was lit. Far from the battlefield, nestled deep within the green valleys of Eldwyn, life moved peacefully. The village of Windmere was untouched by war, hidden behind layers of forests and silence. Here, shepherds sang, children played, and the horrors of the outside world were nothing more than bedtime stories. But on that fateful night, something unnatural stirred. A scream shattered the stillness, not of terror, but of childbirth. Inside a modest cottage at the edge of the village, a woman fought for her life as her child was born under a blood moon. The local midwife, seasoned but wary, had never seen anything like it. The sky outside pulsed with crimson clouds. The wind carried whispers no human ear could understand. And then, a baby cried. But it wasn't the cry that stopped the midwife in her tracks. It was the eyes. Eyes that glowed with an otherworldly red, like burning coals in a furnace. Eyes that once stared down armies, shattered heroes, and commanded legions of darkness. The baby boy didn't scream like a helpless newborn. He stared, quiet, alert, too aware. The mother, unaware of what she had brought into the world, cradled him with love. "Kael, I'll name you Kael." But deep within that tiny form, something stirred. He remembered everything. The betrayal, the blade in his chest, the holy light that had tried to snuff him out, and most importantly, the curse. The spell he cast moments before death had worked perfectly. His soul had crossed the veil, embedded into a new vessel, a perfect one. This time he would grow unnoticed. No horns, no wings, no cursed markings. Just a human face and the power of a god locked within. But even power sealed cannot go unnoticed forever. When Kael was just 3 months old, strange things began to happen. The family's sickly livestock were suddenly healed overnight. His cries would make fires flicker and walls tremble. And one night, a local hunter swore he saw a shadow bowing before the infant's cradle. The villagers whispered. Some called it a miracle, others a curse. The priest came to bless the child, but the moment his holy staff touched Kael's skin, it blackened and cracked in half. The priest fled in terror. And so the child who should never have been, born of darkness, wrapped in human skin, grew silently in a village that knew not what they harbored. Kael watched the world through glowing red eyes, waiting, learning, preparing. Because one day, the world would remember who he truly was.
Most children at 5 are still learning to read. Kael was rewriting the laws of magic. The village of Eldenbrook had no idea what had descended upon them the night Kael was born. Not a blessing, not a miracle, but a force long thought eradicated. At 5 years old, Kael looked like any other child. Pale skin, shaggy black hair, eyes too big for his small face. But those eyes glowed faintly crimson in the dark, like embers waiting to reignite the world. To the villagers, he was quiet, respectful, and even a little shy. He helped his aging foster grandmother collect herbs, tended to injured birds, and played in the fields with other children. His laugh was soft, his smile disarming. But beneath that gentle facade, the Demon King stirred. Each night, while the village slept, Kael opened forbidden tomes that no mortal child should have access to. Not because they were hidden, but because they were long lost to history. These books didn't come from a library. They were pulled from memory. The runes he etched into wood and stone weren't gibberish. They were structural matrices, spell frameworks used by ancient demon lords to collapse kingdoms. He tested them on rats and birds. When one of the spells caused time to pause around a dying fox, he didn't flinch. He simply took notes. He wasn't learning. He was remembering. By the time he turned 5, Kael had already developed his own unique spell system, a blend of human mana theory and demonic blood alchemy. And no one suspected a thing, not even when Count Varel, a visiting noble with an interest in arcane talent, arrived to test Kael's knowledge. The noble sat before the boy, smug, condescending. "Tell me, child, do you know what a mana gate is?" Kael stared back blankly. Which one? Inner, external, ancestral, or corrupted? The noble blinked. Kael smiled. Within minutes, the boy unraveled a puzzle spell the Count had spent years decoding. Then, without being asked, he exposed the noble secret, an illegitimate child hidden in a foreign estate, whose existence would destroy Varel's political career. "You shouldn't lie to people who see through souls," Kael said softly, hands folded politely in his lap. The Count left in a panic. But even that wasn't Kael's goal. The real reason for his performance? He needed access to the royal archives, and nobles were just pawns on the board he was already beginning to play.
Some monsters are born, others are forged in fire. But the most dangerous ones, they awaken silently. The forest was unusually quiet that morning. Birds didn't sing, the wind didn't move. Kael felt it, the stillness, the tension. His instincts, honed by centuries of war and a past life, whispered a warning. But his grandmother didn't hear it. She hummed softly as she picked herbs by the riverbed, trusting the peace of the woods they'd walked for years. Kael, 5 years old by appearance but far older in soul, stayed close. Something in the air tasted wrong. And then it happened. From the trees came a sharp whistle, a signal followed by chaos. 6 bandits burst through the underbrush, weapons raised, eyes wild with desperation. They weren't just thieves. They were predators. Hardened criminals who preyed on small villages, and they saw an old woman and a child as easy pickings. "Don't run," the leader sneered, grabbing Kael's grandmother and shoving her to the ground. She cried out in pain. Kael's heart didn't race. His eyes simply narrowed. One of the bandits stepped forward, pressing a rusted blade to the boy's throat. Pretty face. Shame it won't last. But the moment that cold steel kissed Kael's skin, something snapped. A single drop of blood trickled from his neck, and the world stopped. The leaves hung frozen in the air. The river ceased to flow. The very wind refused to move. And then Kael opened his eyes. They weren't red. They were black fire rimmed in molten gold, the mark of the Demon King's true awakening. He didn't scream. He didn't move. He simply looked at the man holding him. And the bandit began to burn from the inside out. His scream was brief, cut off mid-breath as he crumbled to ash. The others backed away, horrified, weapons trembling in their hands. But Kael raised his hand, and the shadows responded. Ribbons of darkness slithered from the trees, wrapping around the remaining men, their bones shattered with sickening cracks. Their bodies twisted, crushed into themselves as if reality had rejected their presence. Within seconds, the forest was silent again. Only Kael stood, his breathing calm, eyes slowly fading back to crimson. His grandmother, bruised but alive, stirred behind him. She didn't understand what had happened. The villagers wouldn't either. But someone would. Somewhere far from the forest, those attuned to ancient magic would feel it, the return of a power that should not exist. The Demon King was no longer sleeping. He was awake.
Sometimes truth is more dangerous than lies, and sometimes justice demands exile. Kael had grown, not just in age, but in influence. Though still a child on the outside, he had already become a quiet force within the capital. After saving the Countess's son from a poisoned wine cup during a noble banquet, whispers of the gifted boy spread across the inner walls of the royal court. He was invited to the palace. Tutors were assigned. High-ranking nobles leaned in to hear his thoughts on mana theory, while scholars debated the boy's insights on arcane symmetry. Even the king had watched him from afar, intrigued. But Kael hadn't come for fame. He came for knowledge and something more.
a crack in the kingdom's fragile shell of order. He found it in Lord Merowyn, a decorated noble, advisor to the throne, a man praised for his service during the war against the demons, but behind that silver tongue and polished armor hid a beast far worse than any monster. Kael uncovered records of stolen war funds, illegal experimentation on orphans, and forbidden soul-binding rituals, things that would shatter the kingdom if exposed. And so, he exposed them. At a high council meeting, Kael calmly laid the evidence before the king. Scrolls, blood-stamped contracts, hidden sigils traced back to the underworld's cults. For a moment, the room was silent. The nobles stared in disbelief. Then came the laughter, not from joy, but from Lord Merowyn himself. "Well played, boy, but you've miscalculated. The court fears magic it cannot control, and you're a child with the eyes of a demon." The accusation hit like thunder. The mood shifted. The whispers began. Dark sorcery, mind control. His power is unnatural. Lord Merowyn turned to the king. "What proof have we that he is not the source of corruption? He speaks of demon rituals, perhaps because he practices them." Kael stood still, silent, as guards grabbed his arms. No trial, no hearing, just exile, for the safety of the realm. And just like that, the boy who had revealed the truth was cast out as a criminal. But Kael didn't fight back. As he was marched through the castle gates and tossed into the cold wilds beyond the city, he looked back only once, not with fear, but with absolute clarity. "I'll return," he whispered, voice cold and sure, "as your king." And from that moment on, the kingdom had not banished a boy. They had created their future ruler.
Exile doesn't break monsters, it perfects them. Banished and forgotten, Kael wandered alone through frost-covered valleys and forests cursed by time. The world thought he'd perish without food, shelter, or protection. But Kael didn't need safety. He needed solitude. Because somewhere in the farthest reaches of the land, past the whispering peaks and ruins of the old empire, something ancient called to him. A dream, a vision, a memory not quite his own. A stairwell made of obsidian, a door sealed by blood, and at its heart, the grimoire of ruin. It had once been his, in a former life, before the betrayal, before death. Now, it waited. He reached the ruins after days of travel. Bones of forgotten beasts littered the path. Arcane traps shimmered in the snow like dying stars. Any ordinary soul would have turned back. Kael? He stepped forward, welcomed by the darkness. At the center of the collapsed temple lay a spiral staircase descending into the black. Each step down felt like falling deeper into himself. Down, 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 until he reached the chamber. It was silent, undisturbed for centuries. There, resting on a pedestal of chained bone and scorched obsidian, sat a book wrapped in charred leather and sealed by 4 hell-bound sigils, each pulsing with ancient hatred. The Forbidden Grimoire. As Kael approached, the air grew colder. Shadows crept along the walls. A voice, old as creation, echoed in the chamber. "You are not the one who bound me, and yet you carry his soul." Kael placed his hand on the cover. The seals shattered. A surge of magic exploded through the chamber, lighting the walls with red flame and shattering the chains.
The grimoire opened on its own, revealing thousands of pages filled with symbols lost to time. Blood magic, soul transference, God-breaking spells, time distortion theories. Kael didn't just read it. He remembered it. The knowledge flowed back into him like it had been locked behind a dam, now broken. His body trembled, veins glowed faintly violet, his shadow stretched unnaturally. And when the magic settled, Kael opened his eyes. They were no longer crimson. They were void black, ringed in silver flame. The grimoire floated behind him like a phantom companion, bound not by chains, but by will. He walked out of the dungeon not as a banished boy, but as something far more dangerous. A reincarnated king armed with the very magic the world once destroyed itself to erase. And he was just getting started.
When the world forgets a monster, it sleeps. But when the monster remembers the world, it begins to rebuild. The forbidden grimoire pulsed beside Kael like a living heart, a heart made of bone, ash, and ancient rage. Since binding with the tome, Kael had walked in silence through dead lands, abandoned ruins, and cursed battlegrounds, not searching for enemies, but for allies long lost to death. His plan was no longer survival, it was ascension. The Demon King in his former life had not ruled alone. He had commanded 7 generals, beings forged from blood, magic, and wrath, each one powerful enough to destroy nations. When Kael fell, so did they. Their souls scattered across the battlefield, locked in magical prisons, buried beneath holy seals. But now, one by one, he would bring them back. Using necromantic rites pulled from the grimoire, rituals so old that even the gods had forgotten their origin, Kael sought out their resting places. First came Vera, the Blade Queen. Her skeletal remains rested beneath the sunken castle of El Marin, sealed beneath a lake of holy water. Kael drained the lake with a single incantation, shattered the warded tomb, and offered her soul a new vessel, a body forged from magic and mortal flesh. Her eyes opened, shimmering red steel. She dropped to one knee. "My king," she whispered. Then came Drone, the famine beast, reanimated within a mountain of ash. His new form, leaner and more human, retained the hunger of 1,000 cursed winters. And one by one, the others followed, summoned from shadow, stitched into flesh that would pass through the world unnoticed until the time was right. By the 7th moon, Kael stood in a hidden cavern lit by green fire, surrounded by figures cloaked in black. They looked human, but they were not. They were resurrected wrath, bound not by chains, but loyalty. "The kingdoms still believe I am gone," Kael said quietly. "But we are the silence before the storm, the ember before the inferno." Outside that cave, the world continued on, but across the continent, mages awoke in the night drenched in sweat. Their magic trembled. Clerics dropped to their knees in fear. Oracles saw visions of black banners, burning cities, and a boy with silver fire in his eyes. A dark pulse had returned, and those who once hunted the Demon King would soon kneel before him.
To destroy a kingdom, you don't always need an army. Sometimes, all it takes is enrollment. The Royal Academy of Ardanthia, a place where noble bloodlines, promising mages, and royal descendants gathered to sharpen their skills. Shielded by holy enchantments and fortified by centuries of tradition, it was considered the safest and most sacred institution in the empire. To most, it was a school. To Kael, It was an opportunity. Cloaked in a false identity, Kael arrived at the academy gates as a humble scholarship student named Elric. His magic signature? Artificially muted using a forbidden seal he designed himself. His eyes? Hidden behind illusion runes to mask the fire within. He passed the entrance exam without effort, conjuring a perfect mana circle in under 3 seconds. The proctors whispered, confused by his raw ability, but he kept his head low and his smile disarming. Kael wasn't here to show off. He was here to dig. While other students fumbled over elemental spells and studied magical theory, Kael quietly mapped out the academy's infrastructure. Using spirit-sensing techniques from the grimoire, he traced magical interference beneath the library, a distortion too strong to be natural. One night, under cover of darkness, he descended into the hidden levels of the academy. Through a sealed hallway masked by illusion, he found it. A spiral staircase carved in obsidian, leading into a forbidden dungeon long erased from public records. And what he found inside changed everything. Dozens of chambers, dozens of cages. Inside them, monsters, demons, chimeras, even ancient familiars, all sealed in stasis. Some still pulsing with faint magic, others locked in magical sleep. All of them forgotten. And Kael knew why. This was not a prison. It was a vault, a secret weapon repository, storing creatures too dangerous to destroy, yet too valuable to waste. The academy wasn't just a school. It was a fortress hiding a monstrous arsenal. Kael smiled. These weren't prisoners. They were recruits. With a flick of his hand and a whisper of forbidden code, he began to unseal the first chamber. A serpentine beast uncurled its massive body, yellow eyes burning into his. "You serve me now," Kael said. One by one, the monsters awakened. They didn't fight. They recognized his aura, the same one who once ruled them in a past life. And above ground, the students laughed and studied, unaware that beneath their feet, power older than the empire had just been set free.
Sometimes the heart is drawn to the very thing it was taught to destroy. Princess Lyra of Ardenthia was known across the kingdom not just for her beauty, but for her sharp tongue, unmatched swordsmanship, and one unshakable belief: all demons must perish. Her hatred was not inherited, it was earned. Her mother, a saint of the Holy Order, had died leading the charge against the Demon King in the final war. Since then, Lyra's blade had never wavered in its mission to eliminate anything tainted by darkness. So when an anonymous tip warned of a plot to end her life during a diplomatic visit to the Royal Academy, she wasn't afraid. She welcomed it. She just didn't expect him. The attempt came in broad daylight. Lyra had just exited the Academy's East Garden when 3 cloaked assassins struck, blades laced with spirit poison, illusions to mask their movements, each blow aimed to kill without question. The guards were useless, overwhelmed in seconds. But as the first dagger neared her heart, the world seemed to pause. A blast of force rippled through the air, knocking the assassin back like a leaf in a storm. From the shadows of the garden, a lone student stepped forward. A boy with raven-black hair and eyes the color of molten silver. Kael. Or rather, Elric, as he was known within the academy. He casually parried a poison blade with a wooden training sword and crushed a mage's spell seal mid-cast. The final assassin tried to flee, only to freeze in place, suspended by invisible threads of mana Kael had laced through the garden hedges minutes before the attack began. Lyra stared at him, stunned. "Who are you?" she demanded. He smiled softly. "Just another student." From that moment, something in her shifted.
She watched him from afar. His aura, calm, controlled, yet impossibly deep, unsettled her. He was unlike the other mages who scrambled for status and approval. Elric kept to himself, never overreaching, but never underperforming. And when she tried to question him later, he looked into her eyes and said quietly, "Some demons wear armor, others wear crowns. It's not the horns you should fear. It's the silence." She hated how it made sense. And she hated even more how her heart skipped when he walked away. But the truth was unavoidable. The princess who had sworn to slay every demon had just been saved by one.
In a world where power is measured by what you can tame, one boy made the untamable bow with a whisper. Every year, the Royal Academy held the beast-binding trial, a rite of passage designed to test the courage and magical control of its most promising students. For most, it was the moment that defined their worth. Bonding with a magical creature, even a small one, could raise one's status and guarantee a future as a royal mage or knight. Dozens of students gathered in the grand arena, where cages lined the perimeter. Within them roared and snarled all manner of beasts, flamehounds, spectral lions, frost-winged hawks. The stronger the beast you could bind, the higher your rank in the academy. Kael, still disguised as Elric, stood silently among the crowd, hands in his pockets, uninterested. The others whispered, "Why's the new kid even here? He doesn't talk to anyone. He's just a scholarship brat, probably can't even handle a whisper bird." But when the headmaster called for the trial to begin, something changed. A tremor shook the arena. Students gasped as the central gate, one that hadn't opened in over a decade, creaked open. Out stepped a beast shrouded in storm clouds and ember light. A Therion, the Skybane dragon, a creature from legend, said to have slaughtered battalions, turned cities to ash, and vanished into the high mountains when the last Demon King died. No one had seen it since. The instructors panicked. "That's not supposed to be here! Seal the gate! Everyone get back!" The dragon landed with a thunderous roar. The ground cracked beneath its claws. Its wings blotted out the sun. Students screamed, scattering in fear. But Kael didn't move. Instead, he stepped forward, slowly, casually, and raised his hand. The dragon's head snapped in his direction. Their eyes met. For one long, silent moment, the world held its breath. Then, the dragon lowered itself. Its great wings folded, its massive head dipped, touching the ground before Kael's feet. Gasps rippled through the crowd. He didn't even cast a spell. No chant, no binding circle? What is he? Kael gently touched the beast's snout. "You remember me," he whispered, almost too softly to hear. "You served me once, and you will again." The dragon rumbled, not in defiance, but in submission. From that day forward, no one questioned Kael's place at the academy. He wasn't just feared, he wasn't just respected. He had become something untouchable. Some powers are too great to be measured, but when you try, you break the scale. The day of the final assessment had arrived, a sacred tradition within the Royal Academy. Every mage, nobleborn or commoner, had to undergo the test, a ritual where their magical strength was recorded and ranked by the arcane crystal, a divine artifact said to be blessed by the gods themselves. The results determined everything: class advancement, sponsorship, and in many cases, the right to stay at the academy. Failure meant expulsion. Success meant fame. For most students, it was the most important day of their lives. But for Kael, it was just another performance. He stood in the queue, quiet and unassuming. Elric, the name on the scroll read. He hadn't spoken to anyone all morning.
Rumors swirled around him like smoke. He tamed the Skybane dragon. No one knows who his sponsor is. Some say he's a demon in human skin. He ignored them. One by one, students stepped forward, placed their hands on the crystal, and watched as its radiant glow revealed their power tier: bronze, silver, gold, and rarely platinum. Cheers erupted for a girl who scored high. Gasps followed when a noble heir failed to reach gold. Then came Kael's turn. He stepped forward. The instructors and even a few council members leaned in. They'd been watching him, waiting, trying to figure him out. Kael placed his palm on the arcane crystal. Silence. Then, light. A pulse surged through the hall. The crystal glowed violently, brighter than ever before. Lines of ancient script floated into the air. The glow turned red, then violet, then black, then cracks. The crystal groaned, splitting down the middle. The instructors screamed, trying to shield their barriers. Too late. With a thunderous shatter, the arcane crystal exploded, sending fragments across the room like meteor shards. Magic surged like a shockwave, knocking down half the audience. When the dust cleared, Kael stood untouched, hands still raised, eyes glowing faint silver. The head examiner staggered forward, eyes wide in disbelief. That crystal was created by the gods. It was flawed, he said calmly. The hall erupted in chaos. He broke a divine artifact. Only heretics can manipulate forbidden energy like that. He must be a dark mage. Whispers became accusations. But Kael didn't flinch. They had wanted to measure his power, and now they knew. He couldn't be measured.
Some truths remain buried for a reason, but once unearthed, they demand blood. They came at night, robed figures cloaked in silver and blue, moving with precision and silence. Kael had sensed them long before they breached the barrier around his dormitory, but he allowed it. He had grown curious. They called themselves the Order of Astrex, a secret faction older than the Royal Academy itself. Created after the last Demon War, their sole purpose was to detect reincarnated threats and eliminate them. Kael didn't resist when they bound him in enchanted chains laced with celestial ore. They whispered incantations as they carried him beneath the academy grounds, deep into a hidden catacomb that pulsed with divine seals. Walls glowed with anti-demonic scriptures. Even the air resisted his breath. At the center of the chamber stood a circular dais etched with forgotten runes. Floating above it, the soul mirror, a relic carved from the bones of a fallen archangel, said to reflect not a person's form, but the truth of their soul. They placed Kael before it, chaining his arms behind his back. "You stand accused of being the reincarnated Demon King," the High Inquisitor declared. "You will face the trial of origin. The mirror shall reveal what lies beneath your flesh." Kael looked up, unfazed. "And if it does, then your existence ends here." The soul mirror activated. Light spun through the chamber, blinding and divine. Runes lifted from the floor, hovering like burning feathers. The relic glowed with a brilliance so pure, even the Order stepped back. Then, the image began to take shape. First, Kael's human form, the boy, the student, the illusion. Then, cracks. Beneath the image, horns formed, wings, fire, blood, a crown of shadow. The Demon King, unmistakable.
The room fell deathly silent. The mirror pulsed violently, struggling to contain the truth. A surge of dark flame erupted from it, forcing several inquisitors to their knees. The artifact cracked, and still, Kael stood. "Now you know," he said, voice steady, echoing with an ancient timbre. "So do it. Kill me." But none moved. The High Inquisitive trembled. This shouldn't be possible. The reincarnation spell was lost. You should not exist." Kael smiled. "I do. And now that you've seen what I am, you must decide." The Order of Astrak stood frozen, blades in hand, but unwilling to strike. Because in that moment, they realized something far more terrifying than the return of the Demon King. They couldn't stop him.
Legends say that the soul never lies. But what happens when the truth is too powerful to erase? Kael had known this moment would come. Since the day he awakened the grimoire, since he shattered the Academy's crystal, since he looked a god beast in the eye and made it kneel, he knew someone, somewhere, was watching. And they had been. The Order of the Celestial Brand, an ancient secret sect hidden deep within the Empire's foundations. They operated in silence, without the Crown's knowledge, answering only to the divine. Their mission? Root out reincarnated evils, especially one, the Demon King. They struck with precision, veiled by sacred glyphs and silent spells. Kael allowed himself to be taken, not out of weakness, but out of interest. There were things even he hadn't seen in this new world, and he was curious. They brought him to an underground sanctum beneath the Temple of Etherion. No windows, no echoes, just glowing runes on stone, pulsing with holy energy designed to suppress all dark forces. At the center of the room was a towering mirror unlike any Kael had ever seen. The ether glass. Not a tool of sight, but of revelation. It reflected not the body, but the soul, and every life that had passed through it. "Begin the trial," the high priest commanded, his voice shaking behind his ceremonial mask. Kael was chained in place. Not that it mattered. The chains couldn't hold what he was. The ether glass shimmered, activating. The first reflection showed a boy, Kael, quiet, brilliant, misunderstood. Then the image cracked, and what lay beneath began to bleed through. Flames, dark wings, a shadowed crown of bone, a throne made of the dead, armies kneeling, worlds burning. The Demon King. The chamber trembled. The youngest priest stumbled backward in terror. Others fell to their knees, their divine protection faltering under the pressure of what the mirror revealed. "No, this cannot be," one whispered. The high priest's voice quaked. "The verdict is clear. He is the one, the soul of the Demon King, reborn." Kael opened his eyes. "And now that you know, what will you do?" They hesitated. They had the divine right to destroy him, yet none stepped forward. Not because they didn't believe it, but because, deep down, they felt it. He was no longer killable. The reincarnation wasn't just complete, it was perfected. Kael's power had not returned in fragments, it had returned in full. And the world would soon learn that their second chance was already over.
mercy was an option. They chose chains instead. Now they will learn what it costs to try and cage a god. High above the clouds, tethered only by ancient wind glyphs and forgotten spells, floated the sky temple of Aetherion, a sanctified structure unreachable by common folk. It was said to be the divine seat of justice, a place where judgment was carried out not by kings, but by fate itself. Kael had been imprisoned there. For 7 days, divine chains had bound his arms. Sacred sigils burned across his chest. The clergy believed they had him contained. They whispered prayers, performed purification rites, and sharpened holy weapons in secret. They thought they still had time. But Kael had waited long enough. At dusk, it began. The air grew heavy. The runes on the prison walls began to flicker. Priests rushed to reinforce the seals, but their chants broke mid-sentence as a sound pierced the air. Not a roar, but a heartbeat. Boom, boom, boom. Kael opened his eyes. His chains cracked. The floor trembled, and then, with a low whisper, he spoke a single word from the forbidden grimoire, a word that hadn't been heard since the old world fell. And the temple answered. Stone shattered. The sigils ignited in black flame. The sacred relics meant to suppress his soul began to melt, their sacred energy corrupted by the sheer magnitude of Kael's wrath. The priests tried to flee. They didn't make it. Kael moved like a shadow on fire, swift, precise, merciless. One wave of his hand disintegrated a battalion of paladins. Another twist of his wrist tore open the temple walls, exposing the endless sky beyond. He stood in the center of the sacred hall, now a ruin, arms outstretched as magic swirled around him like a black storm. Then he looked down, at the Capitol far below, lights flickering, flags fluttering atop towers, unaware of the doom hanging in the sky. He raised a hand, and the entire sky temple began to fall. The magic holding it aloft shattered in an instant. 1,000 tons of ancient stone and divine steel plummeted toward the city. Screams echoed as the structure descended like judgment from the heavens. Kael stood atop the wreckage as it crashed into the outer walls of the Capitol, sending shockwaves for miles. There was no escape, no survivors in the temple, no mercy left to offer. The message was clear. The Demon King had returned, and this time he wasn't hiding anymore.
The cruelest blades don't come from enemies. They come from those who stand closest, smiling as they strike. For weeks, Kael and Princess Lyra had shared a dangerous closeness, a strange, unspoken bond forged through glances, near deaths, and words never meant to be said aloud. She despised demons, hunted them, hated them, and yet she kept coming back to him. They walked the garden together, argued under moonlight, fought side by side in training arenas. She had even defended him publicly when the Academy's suspicion turned hostile. But she had also seen the signs, the aura that flickered around him during moments of anger, the way the Skybane dragon bowed to his presence, the whispers, the truth she refused to believe until the day came when she could no longer ignore it. The trial of the reincarnated had leaked. The world now knew Kael was the Demon King reborn, and for Lyra, whose mother died by that very Demon King's hand, the truth wasn't just betrayal, it was personal.
She confronted him alone beneath the shattered archways of the Eastern Tower ruins, her hair loose in the wind, her blade hidden beneath her cloak. Kael stood before her, silent. She whispered, "Tell me it's not true." He didn't. She stepped closer. Her hands trembled. "I trusted you. I defended you." "You still can," he said softly. "It's not the past I'm reviving. It's the future I'm taking back." Her eyes welled with tears. Her grip tightened. "I'm sorry." And then she stabbed him. The enchanted blade slid between his ribs, blessed by the Church of Light, forged to pierce demonic hearts. Blood bloomed across his chest. But Kael didn't fall. He smiled. "You did exactly what I needed." Lyra gasped, not because he still stood, but because she felt it. The air shifted. The sky dimmed. The blood on the blade glowed. The spell had been set long ago, a seal buried deep in Kael's soul, one that could only be broken through an act of pure betrayal. Her betrayal. The magic around him surged, black flames spiraling upward, burning the very air with ancient sigils. Power, the kind not seen since the First Era, erupted from his body, restoring not only his strength, but a part of himself that had been locked away for centuries. He leaned close, voice cold but calm. "You didn't kill me, Lyra. You freed me." And in that moment, as she stepped back, horror etched into her face, Lyra realized she hadn't stopped the Demon King. She had unleashed him.
Some weapons are forged in flame, others in vengeance, but the demon sword was reborn in both. The world remembered his name, but not his weapon. Valkyrian. A blade once feared across realms, said to be carved from the bones of a dead god and quenched in the blood of fallen kings. Its very presence could wither crops, bend magic, and silence armies. When Kael fell in his past life, Valkyrian was shattered, broken by a coalition of the last 5 holy nations, sealed and scattered across the world, and fragments no mortal hand could ever reunite. But Kael was no mortal. And now, reborn with power greater than before, he would reclaim what was his. Piece by piece, he hunted down the remnants, one buried beneath the ruins of the Solstice Cathedral, another hidden in a time-locked vault beneath the Tower of Mages, and the final shard sealed in the spine of a living dragon that dared to call itself a god. It took time. But Kael had patience and fury. When he had all the pieces, he traveled to the volcanic abyss known only as the Mouth of Oblivion, a place where magic bent and time itself recoiled. There, in the heart of the inferno, he began the ritual. A circle of traitors' blood surrounded the forge, those who had once knelt beside him, then drove blades into his back. Their souls screamed from the void as he summoned their essence to fuel the flame. He cast the dragon's breath into the forge, a condensed plume of pure, ancient fire, hot enough to melt divine metals, hot enough to bend fate. The shards of Valkyrian floated into the heat, twisting, fusing, remembering what they once were. Kael raised his hand, and the blade was reborn. A sleek, jet-black sword, laced with red veins of molten energy. Its edge pulsed like a heartbeat. Its weight bent the ground beneath it. Even the grimoire flinched in its presence. He swung it once. The air cracked. A mountain peak in the far distance split clean in half. A forest miles away disintegrated, as if time had skipped its existence. And Kael smiled. This time,
he whispered, voice like thunder in a storm. "I won't just reclaim my throne. I'll rewrite the world." From that moment on, every nation felt a ripple. Every seer saw a vision. Every king heard the echo of one truth. Valkyrian has returned, and the end has begun.
He was born a human. He died a demon. He returned as something the world had no name for, until now. The sky over Venaris, the war fortress of the West, darkened without clouds, not by weather, but by power. The capital's walls, once thought impregnable, shimmered with protective enchantments that had never been broken in 300 years. Armies from across the continent had tried to lay siege. All had failed. Kael didn't bring an army. He brought Valkyrion. With one swing, the barrier shattered like glass. The generals laughed at first. "A single boy?" they sneered. "Send the archers." They did. None of the arrows touched him. They froze mid-air, suspended by the sheer pressure of his presence, before turning back on their senders with divine speed. Screams followed. Chaos rippled across the battlements. Then came the mages. Elemental storms, binding spells, soul chains. Kael walked through them all, untouched, unbothered, until he stood before the gates. He didn't knock. He spoke. "Open," he said, and the gates obeyed. The city was his by sundown. By nightfall, Venaris knelt. He didn't burn it. He didn't enslave its people. He rewrote its law, dismantled the noble houses, and declared the era of bloodlines and false kings over. No more rule by ancestry. No more power through blood purity. "Today," he said, from atop the throne once reserved for conquerors and tyrants, "a new realm is born, one that fears neither demons nor humans, one ruled by both in one body." He did not wear a crown. Instead, black flames circled his head, a living sigil of his power, a symbol not forged by gold but by history itself. The human demon king. The world reacted immediately. The Holy Empire declared war. The Mage Consortium went silent. Rebel factions flocked to Venaris in secret, swearing loyalty to the one who had done the impossible. But what terrified the rulers of the world most was not the fact that Kael had taken a nation in a day. It was that he never raised an army to do it. He ruled not through bloodshed, but through inevitability. A force that could not be ignored. A king that could not be classified. Not mortal, not monster. Just Kael. And with Venaris as his seat of power, the first stone had fallen. The rest of the world would follow or fall. When mortals fail to stop a threat, they pray. But what happens when the gods hear those prayers and begin to tremble themselves? The rise of Kael, the human demon king, echoed beyond the mortal realm. His conquest of Venaris wasn't just political, it was cosmic. Across temples and celestial altars, the gods began to feel something they hadn't felt since the dawn of creation: fear. The Council of Ascendants, divine arbiters who ruled the heavens with unyielding judgment, convened for the first time in 1,000 years. They had watched empires crumble, demons rise and fall, and stars burn out without blinking. But Kael, he was different. He wielded spells that predate our scriptures, spoke Valthor, god of order. "He walks through divine fire and speaks our true names," whispered Illyra, goddess of light. "He knows," growled Euron, god of war. "He remembers what should have been forgotten." And so, for the first time since the Age of Origin, the gods descended. The skies split open over Vernaris. Celestial light poured down like molten judgment. Trumpets sounded that no mortal ear could survive. Time slowed, and the air cracked beneath the pressure of raw divinity. 12 figures formed in the heavens, each brighter than the sun, each a force capable of erasing continents. Kael stood alone at the top of the obsidian tower. No fear, no surprise. He was waiting. "You tread too far, Reincarnate. You've broken sacred law. We come to end what should never have returned." Kael stepped forward and laughed. "You speak of law, but you were born from mine." Silence. "What nonsense is this?" Euron roared, drawing a sword of starlight. Kael raised his hand, and the grimoire of ruin appeared beside him, pages fluttering wildly. He turned to a section written in a language older than the gods themselves. "Your names, your forms, your divinity are all products of this book, of my magic. You were fragments created to serve as balance after I fell." He raised a single finger, and the gods screamed. One by one, the celestial forms began to flicker, unraveling at the seams. Their divine light twisted. Their true names began to burn away. "I don't fear gods. I authored them." Illyra fell from the sky, wings shattering into feathers of ash. Euron dropped his blade, hands trembling as his power drained from his limbs like blood from a dying beast. Only Valthor remained. "Then what are you?" the god of order asked, voice barely a whisper. Kael stepped into the air, eyes burning with the truth. "I am what you were meant to keep buried. The first flame, the last name. I am not your enemy, Valthor." He grinned. "I am your father." And as the heavens shook, the gods knew. The era of worship had ended. Now came the era of reckoning. The world drew a line. Kael stepped over it. Now the final war has begun, and only one future will remain. The sky had not turned blue in weeks. Smoke curled from the shattered remains of cities that defied him. Oceans churned as ancient sea beasts rose once more. The dead refused to stay buried. Whispers of the human demon king spread like wildfire, reaching even the farthest islands and mountain enclaves. Every kingdom, every empire, every holy order that still dared to breathe, united under one desperate cause: stop Kael. The banners of the Holy Concord rose, stitched together from 100 nations. Paladins of the divine flame stood beside beast tamers of the eastern clans. The elven archmages broke their neutrality for the first time in millennia. Even the remnants of the gods, their power fraying and feeble, lent their final blessings to this last, unified army. It was called the Last March. They came with light in their hearts and terror in their bones, millions strong, an army built not just of soldiers, but of fear, rage, and the crumbling idea of a world that once made sense. And waiting for them was Kael. Atop the broken fortress of Black Spire, surrounded by spires of bone and storm clouds that never left, he watched the horizon. The land itself warped around him. The earth breathed dark manna. The wind whispered curses. Behind him stood his own army. Not soldiers, monsters. Beasts that had once ruled nightmares, now collared in sigils of obedience. Undead warriors stitched with memory and steel. Former nobles and outcasts, broken humans Kael had reshaped into instruments of vengeance. And the 7 generals, his resurrected legends, stood at the front, weapons raised, souls blazing. Kael didn't speak. He simply stepped forward and planted Valkyrion, the reforged demon blade, into the earth. The ground trembled. All across the world, seers collapsed with visions of fire. Prophets screamed as their tongues turned to ash. The magical ley lines twisted toward Black Spire like rivers returning to their source. The time for secrets had ended. The age of gods had collapsed. Now only 2 things remained: a broken world and the one who would rebuild it. As the trumpets of war sounded and the holy armies charged across the plains, Kael whispered into the storm, "Let the world judge me. Let the brave come." He turned, eyes glowing with ancient flame, and let them fall.
They called it madness. They called it suicide. They called it impossible. They were right, until he walked into the storm. The battlefield stretched for miles, a living tide of steel and magic. The united armies of the Holy Concord had gathered everything they had: divine archers, elemental siege engines, titanic war beasts, dragon riders, soul-bound heroes, all arranged in perfect formation. At their heart stood the 7 divine champions, legendary figures, each wielding power said to rival gods. And facing them, one man, Kael. No army, no generals, no beasts, only him, clad in black robes laced with molten sigils, his silver eyes glowing brighter than the sun overhead. In his hand, Valkyrion, resting lazily on his shoulder. They laughed at first. Then he moved. Faster than sight. The first wave disintegrated, not cut, not burned, but erased, as if their very existence had been denied. Magic shattered in midair. Enchanted shields crumbled like dried leaves. Beasts turned on their handlers, driven mad by Kael's aura alone. He didn't need to fight. He danced. Teleporting from point to point, he cut down war priests mid-prayer, silenced spellcasters with flicks of his fingers, and summoned spectral chains that dragged giants into the earth screaming. The divine champions struck together, calling upon forbidden miracles, merging their powers into a single, godlike spear of holy judgment. Kael caught it with one hand. Then he broke it in 2 and sent the fragments back with explosive force, turning the battlefield into a crater. Blood soaked the soil, the skies darkened. Still, Kael stood alone, untouched, unmatched. But then, the air shifted. A sound like cracking stone echoed across the field. Soldiers fell silent. Even Kael paused. From the heart of the broken storm clouds, something emerged. A figure, tall and wreathed in pure abyssal flame. Horns twisted like roots of the underworld. Wings of shadow, torn and ancient, spread across the sky. His face was Kael's, but older, harsher, filled with something Kael had tried to bury. Ruin, rage, godhood. It was him, the original Demon King, the soul that had once ruled the world with no restraint before Kael's reincarnation was even born. Somehow, it had returned, separate, whole, and angry. They locked eyes across the burning field. The world held its breath. Kael gripped Velkarion tighter. So, I really am my own worst enemy. And from the skies, the Demon King's voice echoed like the voice of death. No, you are my failed reflection. Now watch what true power looks like. The war had begun, but the real battle.
It began with war. It ends with silence, and something more powerful than victory: understanding. The battlefield was unrecognizable. Once a kingdom's heartland, now a wasteland of shattered earth and time-stilled ash. The clash between Kael and his original self, the primordial Demon King, had torn through realms, broken stars, and split reality itself at the seams. But Kael stood, bloodied, breathing, burning with clarity. His other self, the echo of wrath, of conquest, of everything Kael could have become, lay crumbling, dissolving into the void that birthed it. And yet, as the last piece faded, Kael did not celebrate. He felt the truth. The war was never between humans and demons, gods and kings. The war had always been within. The hatred, the vengeance, the endless hunger for dominance, it had consumed the world for generations. And now, Kael saw what must be done to end the cycle. Not with another kingdom, not with another throne, but with a sacrifice. The grimoire trembled beside him, its pages flickering with unspoken spells. Velkarion stood embedded in the ruins, humming with the souls of the fallen. And at the center of his chest, Kael felt it. The demonic core, the source of his rebirth, the anchor of his power. It could keep him alive forever, or remake the world. He chose the latter. Raising his hand, Kael pulled the core from his chest, a brilliant, searing orb of compressed magic and memory. The skies screamed, the stars dimmed, time stopped, and he let it go. The explosion was not destruction, it was rebirth. Magic washed across the world like rain over fire. The living were healed, the undead were laid to rest, the broken beasts bowed and vanished into myth. Kingdoms rebuilt themselves in the memory of peace, not conquest. And Kael? He rose, not as man, not as monster, but as something new, a being of balance. No longer bound by flesh, no longer chained to rage. He became a god, not of light or dark, but of order. A force that whispered through the ley lines, that calmed storms, that guided kings from behind shadows, and touched children's dreams with visions of peace. There were no statues in his name, no temples, no chants, only balance. And the world finally knew something it had forgotten for centuries. The Demon King didn't destroy them. He saved them. Not by conquering, but by letting go. And so the tale of Kael, the human Demon King, comes to an end. Not in fire, not in glory, but in something far greater: balance. He was feared as a monster, hunted as a villain, worshipped as a god. Yet in the end, he became what no one expected: a savior. But the world he left behind, it's still turning. New threats rise, old powers stir, and peace is never permanent. If you enjoyed this epic journey through magic, betrayal, gods, and redemption, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you never miss the next legendary tale. Because this is just one story, and we have so many more to tell. See you in the next saga.